Mark's hands trembled as he fumbled with his tie in the mirror, the wedding invitation mocking him from the dresser. He never imagined attending his brother's wedding alone, not after 15 years of marriage. But life had other plans when cancer took Sarah, leaving him to raise their daughter Emma alone. As he struggled with the tie, something Sarah always did for him, a text notification lit up his phone. It was from his neighbor, Diane. "Before you leave, come by my place. I need to show you something." Little did Mark know that this simple message would change everything, turning his day of dreaded solitude into something he never expected. If you're touched by stories of unexpected kindness and second chances, hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life stories that remind us how beautiful human connection can be. The morning had started like most others in the 2 years since Sarah passed. Mark woke before his alarm, the empty space beside him still jarring even after all this time. He made breakfast for Emma, now 14 and navigating the turbulent waters of adolescence without her mother. They ate mostly in silence, Emma scrolling through her phone while Mark mentally rehearsed how he would get through his brother's wedding later that day. "You sure you don't want to come, sweetie?" Mark asked, knowing the answer but hoping it had changed. Emma looked up briefly. "Dad, I told you. Lily's birthday sleepover has been planned for months. I can't bail now." I know. Just thought I'd check." He smiled weakly. "Uncle Rob will understand." "Besides," Emma added, her eyes softening slightly, "weddings are romantic. Maybe you'll meet someone." Mark nearly choked on his coffee. I'm not looking to." "Dad, it's been 2 years." Emma's voice was gentle but firm, so much like her mother's that it made his chest ache. "Mom wouldn't want you to be alone forever." Mark nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Emma was right, of course. Sarah had made him promise, in those final weeks when they both knew what was coming, that he wouldn't shut himself away from life. "Find joy again," she had whispered, her once strong hand barely able to squeeze his. "Promise me." He had promised. But following through was harder than he'd imagined. After dropping Emma at her friend's house, Mark returned home to prepare for the wedding. The suit he'd bought hung on the closet door, navy blue, because Sarah always said it brought out his eyes. He showered, shaved carefully, and attempted to style his hair in a way that disguised the increasing gray at his temples. When he finally stood before the mirror in his suit, the tie remained his nemesis. After 3 failed attempts, he sighed in frustration. That's when his phone chimed with Diane's text. Diane had moved in next door about 8 months ago. She was friendly but reserved, a freelance graphic designer who kept mostly to herself. They exchanged pleasantries when collecting mail or taking out trash, and occasionally she would ask about Emma's school activities. Mark knew little else about her, except that she made incredible banana bread, which she had brought over when they first met. Curious about her message and grateful for the distraction, Mark walked the short distance to her house and knocked on the door. Diane opened it almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Perfect timing," she said with a smile. She was dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. "You said you needed to show me something?" Mark asked, suddenly aware of how formal he looked compared to her weekend attire. "Yes, come in." She stepped aside to let him enter. "I noticed you leaving earlier in your suit, and then coming back looking, well, a bit stressed." Mark felt his face warm. "My brother's wedding today. Just having some wardrobe issues." Diane's eyes traveled to his crooked tie, and she smiled. "That's actually why I texted you. I thought you might need help with that." Before Mark could respond, she stepped forward. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to his tie. He nodded, surprised by the offer but relieved. Her fingers worked quickly and confidently, undoing his messy attempt and starting fresh. "My dad taught me how to do this when I was little," she explained as she worked. "He said every woman should know how to tie a tie, even if she never wears one herself." Smart man, Mark replied, trying not to notice how close she stood or the faint scent of her perfume. There, she said, stepping back to admire her work. Perfect Windsor knot. Thank you, Mark said, genuinely grateful. You're a lifesaver. Diane hesitated, then asked, is Emma going with you to the wedding? Mark shook his head. Friend's birthday party. She's been looking forward to it for weeks. So you're going alone? There was something in her voice he couldn't quite identify. Yeah. First big family event since. He trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. Diane nodded in understanding. Then, with a determined breath, she said, look, this might sound strange, but, would you like company? Mark blinked in surprise. You want to go to a stranger's wedding? She laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. When you put it that way, it does sound weird. But I thought maybe you'd like to have someone to talk to, dance with, make it less awkward when they call all the couples to the floor. Mark felt a flutter of something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. I couldn't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. She smiled again, and Mark noticed for the first time how her eyes crinkled at the corners. Besides, I love weddings, and I have a dress that's been waiting for an occasion. Are you sure? Mark asked, still hesitant but increasingly drawn to the idea. Give me 15 minutes to get ready, she replied, already moving toward her bedroom. Unless you'd rather go alone? No, Mark said quickly, surprising himself with his eagerness. No, I'd love the company. Exactly 12 minutes later, Diane emerged in a deep burgundy dress that flowed elegantly to just below her knees. Her hair was now arranged in soft waves around her shoulders, and she wore simple but elegant jewelry that caught the light when she moved. You look. Mark searched for the right word, finding himself suddenly tongue-tied. Beautiful, he finally managed. Thank you, she replied, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. You clean up pretty well yourself. The drive to the wedding venue was filled with easy conversation. Mark learned that Diane was 38, had moved to their neighborhood after a divorce, and had chosen freelance work to have more control over her schedule. She asked about his job as an architect, about Emma, and about his brother Rob. So how did Rob meet his fiancée? She asked as they neared the venue, a restored barn on the outskirts of town. Mark smiled at the memory. Believe it or not, they met at a grocery store. They reached for the same bunch of bananas. Diane laughed. That sounds like something from a romantic comedy. It gets better. Rob is terribly allergic to bananas. He was buying them for a coworker's birthday prank. So he was willing to risk anaphylactic shock for a prank? That's Rob for you. Anyway, Melissa thought he was cute, so she pretended to really want those specific bananas. They ended up getting coffee, and the rest is history. That's actually really sweet, Diane said as they pulled into the parking lot. Mark nodded, then took a deep breath as he turned off the engine. I should warn you, my family can be a bit overwhelming. I think I can handle it, she replied with a reassuring smile. Ready? As they walked toward the venue, Mark felt a strange mix of emotions. Guilt, because part of him was actually looking forward to the wedding now. Nervousness, because he hadn't attended a social event with a woman other than Sarah in nearly 20 years. And something else, a tentative, fragile hope that perhaps this day wouldn't be as difficult as he had feared. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Rob and Melissa had opted for personal vows that had most of the guests alternating between laughter and tears. Mark found himself glancing at Diane throughout, watching as she dabbed at her eyes during the emotional moments and smiled during the light-hearted ones. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in cheers. Mark clapped until his hands hurt, genuinely happy for his brother while simultaneously fighting the memories of his own wedding day that threatened to overwhelm him. As if sensing his internal struggle, Diane gently placed her hand over his. The simple gesture anchored him to the present, reminding him that while he would always carry Sarah in his heart, he was still here, still living. The reception was held in the same barn, which had been transformed with twinkling lights, wildflower centerpieces, and long wooden tables that encouraged conversation among guests. Mark introduced Diane to various family members, all of whom gave him knowing looks that he pretended not to notice. His mother pulled him aside while Diane was chatting with one of his cousins. "She seems lovely," she said, her eyes bright with hope. "Mom, it's not like that," Mark protested weakly. "She's just my neighbor. She offered to come so I wouldn't be alone." His mother patted his cheek affectionately. "Whatever you say, dear. But I haven't seen you smile this much in 2 years." Before Mark could respond, the DJ announced that dinner would be served shortly, and everyone should find their seats. Mark and Diane were placed at a table with Rob's college friends and their partners, people Mark knew only vaguely. As they made small talk over salads and roast chicken, Mark was grateful for Diane's easy social grace. She asked thoughtful questions, laughed at the right moments, and somehow made everyone at the table feel included in the conversation. "How long have you two been together?" one of the wives asked during a lull in the conversation. Mark nearly choked on his water, but Diane answered smoothly. "Oh, we're just neighbors and friends. Mark needed a +1, and I love a good wedding." The woman looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I just assumed." "No need to apologize," Diane assured her with a warm smile. "It's a natural assumption at a wedding." Mark shot her a grateful look, impressed by her ability to navigate the awkward moment without making anyone uncomfortable. After dinner came the traditional wedding activities, the cake cutting, the bouquet toss, the first dance. Mark watched as his brother held his new wife close, swaying gently to their chosen song. The happiness radiating from them was almost tangible, and Mark felt a bittersweet pang in his chest. "They look so happy," Diane murmured beside him. "They are," Mark agreed. "Rob waited a long time to find the right person. He's 42. So there's hope for all of us," she said with a small smile. Before Mark could respond, the DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "Now, I'd like to invite all the couples to join our newlyweds on the dance floor." Mark tensed, preparing for the familiar discomfort of being visibly alone at a couple's event. But then Diane stood and extended her hand to him. "Shall we?" she asked, her expression open and inviting. Mark hesitated only briefly before taking her hand and following her to the dance floor. As they found a spot among the other couples, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he had danced. "I should warn you, I'm not very good at this," he admitted as he awkwardly placed his hand on her waist. "That's okay," she replied, resting her hand on his shoulder. "Just follow my lead." And somehow, he did. They moved together with surprising ease, finding a rhythm that felt natural. Mark gradually relaxed, allowing himself to enjoy the moment, the music, the movement, the warmth of Diane's hand in his. "Thank you for this," he said quietly. "For coming with me today. It's been nice. Really nice." Diane's eyes met his, sincere and warm. "I'm glad I came." As the evening progressed, Mark found himself laughing more than he had in years. They danced to fast songs with Emma's choreographed TikTok moves that Diane somehow knew, making Mark feel simultaneously old and young. They sampled every dessert at the elaborate sweet table, debating the merits of chocolate mousse versus key lime pie. They even participated in the conga line that Rob's college roommate started after his third glass of champagne. When the DJ announced the last dance of the night, Mark didn't hesitate to lead Diane back to the floor. This time, he held her a little closer, and she rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "I've had a wonderful time," she said softly. "Me too," Mark replied, surprised by how true it was. "I was dreading today, but it turned out to be perfect." As the song ended, they remained on the dance floor for a moment longer than necessary, neither quite ready for the evening to end. The drive home was quieter than the drive to the wedding, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with shared memories of the day and the gentle hum of the car's engine. When they reached their neighborhood, Mark walked Diane to her door, an unexpected nervousness returning. "Thank you again," he said as they stood on her porch. "For everything." "It was my pleasure," she replied. Then, with a hint of vulnerability in her voice, she added, "Maybe we could do something again sometime? Not a wedding, obviously, but dinner, perhaps?" Mark felt a flutter in his chest, fear, excitement, guilt, hope, all mingled together. "I'd like that," he said finally, surprising himself with his certainty. Diane smiled, relief evident in her expression. "Good. It's a date." The word date hung in the air between them, significant and a little frightening. But also, Mark realized, right. It felt right. After saying goodnight, Mark walked the short distance to his own house, his mind replaying moments from the day. As he unlocked his door, he glanced back at Diane's house and saw her still standing on her porch, watching him. She waved, and he waved back, feeling something shift inside him, like a door long closed was finally creaking open. Inside, he loosened the tie that Diane had so carefully knotted hours earlier. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How was the wedding? Did you survive?" Mark smiled as he typed his response. "It was actually really nice. I had a good time." Emma's reply came quickly. "OMG, did you meet someone?" Mark hesitated, then wrote, "Sort of. I'll tell you about it tomorrow." He set his phone down and walked to the bedroom, where a framed photo of Sarah sat on his nightstand. Her smile was radiant, her eyes full of the life and love that had defined her. "I think you'd like her," he said softly to the photograph. "She made me laugh today. I didn't think I'd laugh at this wedding." As he changed out of his suit, Mark thought about the promise he'd made to Sarah. Find joy again. For the first time since her death, it seemed like a possibility rather than an impossible demand. The next morning, Mark woke to the sound of his doorbell. Still groggy, he pulled on a t-shirt and sweatpants and made his way to the door. Diane stood on his porch, holding 2 coffee cups and a paper bag that smelled enticingly of fresh pastries. "Good morning," she said, looking slightly uncertain. "I thought you might like breakfast. Is it too early?" Mark smiled, feeling more awake by the second. "Not at all. Come in." As they sat at his kitchen table, sharing coffee and croissants, Mark realized that something extraordinary had happened. In the midst of what he had expected to be a day of painful reminders and loneliness, he had found connection. Not a replacement for what he had lost. Nothing could ever replace Sarah, but something new. Something different but equally valuable. "I was thinking," Diane said, interrupting his thoughts, "there's a new restaurant downtown that's supposed to be amazing. Maybe we could try it? Friday night?" Mark looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just a beautiful woman, but a person who had, through one simple act of kindness, helped him take a step forward. "Friday sounds perfect," he replied. Later that day, when Emma returned from her sleepover, bursting with curiosity about the mysterious person her father had mentioned in his text, Mark told her about Diane. "She's our neighbor?" Emma asked, her expression a mixture of surprise and intrigue. "The one with the awesome banana bread?" "That's the one," Mark confirmed. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she said, "Mom would be happy, you know. That you're not alone." Mark felt tears prick at his eyes. "You think so?" "I know so," Emma replied with the certainty of someone much older than her 14 years. "She made you promise, remember?" Mark nodded, unable to speak. "So,